Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And, I hate to say it, Philip, but we are coming to an end, at least for now, for our
Yeah.
journey of the Edan trilogy. How?
All good things come to an end. Yeah.
Indeed. I know. I remember when I first started reading it, I was like, I don't want it to end, but here we are. But yes, we're talking about Return to Edan today. Here we go.
Oh, yeah, I have mine.
You have my copy? Yeah! Or not my copy, but you have a copy as well.
I have a copy. You have a copy? Yep.
But yes, we're talking about Return to Edan today. Because it's the last book of the trilogy. So I would feel pretty I'd feel pretty weird not having you on. It was kind of funny getting this together because I was like, hey Philip, when would you like to do this? I know you like to, or I don't know if you like to, or well, you probably like to do it, but you like to, you often hop on other channels, so I wanted to.
Oh, I love talking with people. Yeah.
Yes, that's great. But I wanted to know when you do it, and you're like, does this Saturday sound good? And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So here we are.
Here we are.
But yes, talking about Return to Edan today. I thought it was a very good ending to the story. Before
Good.
I get into it, I wasn't, it's not one where I'm like, dang it, Philip, you really dropped it there.
Oh,
That would have
well,
been
phew.
that would have been pretty awkward if that were the case, but I don't
Yeah.
think so. I was generally satisfied with it.
Good.
I really liked that it was a kind of, I don't know if this was what you were intending with Return to Edan, but it was kind of a um playing with slash deconstruction of the happily ever after idea that is in a lot of fantasy literature.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, it's true that a lot of, maybe a vast majority of fantasy stories seem to end when the hero wins the day and the villain is conquered and everybody lives happily ever after, presumably, because we don't know, because no one ever actually does anything after that moment. And I figured, what would happen to a hero who gives everything in order to defeat the baddie? What does that look like? What are the consequences of sacrificing everything, laying it all out there? And I thought that could make an interesting story. So that's what I tried to do in Return to Edan, and I'm glad that I attempted it because I think it's the most interesting of the three books in the trilogy, and a lot of readers seem to agree. It's the most different, the most risk taking in terms of just that whole setup, but also I think where it finally ends up, the way it ends. But I had a great time writing this story, and yeah, for me, and you're not supposed to play favorites with your children, but it kind of is my favorite of the three. So
yeah, I think I've heard a couple of other booktubers. I don't remember if it was like, maybe it was Tom Orange who said it, but
uh huh,
um, this was like, this felt like the one that was. I think he said it was your mission statement, for lack of a better word.
hmm.
I don't know if you would agree with that, but I thought it was really, I thought it was a good summation of the trilogy. I mean, it's,
Mhm.
of course, after the war ends, there's still stuff going to happen, which um is nice. Which was
Yeah.
kind of funny. I remember when I was reading, we talked about this last time, but when I talked about I was like, okay, so is he going to drag out this war for 2 books, or is he going to end it here? Well, you ended it here. Well, there are still conflicts going on,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah. And that's, I think, true to the world. What you see in history, and you're a student of history, I know, is that wars don't have a neat ending oftentimes. And not only that, but other conflicts frequently arise in the aftermath of a war. Wars create instability and disruption, and they can and violence and conflict feed off of instability. So it can be a sort of death spiral in many cases. And yeah, I think that that's hopefully something that comes across is that conflict tends to breed more violence, and you see that in the instability at the end of the war. Yes, it's the end of the War of the Way in book two. Bledla, really, his passing, I think, marks that more than anything else, because the War of the Way was really his war.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still many things to be resolved. Like, people don't just say, "Oh, well, I guess we're glad that's done," and then pack up and go home. That's not how it works.
Yeah,
So you do
you
see
had
other
a
factions
oh
continuing the conflict.
oh sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Oh, you're good.
I I mean, Erkenwald's still around. I mean, you kind of made
Yep.
that clear when he did the old super villain. Oh, I'll come back and screw with you later, but we'll be fine for now.
I mean, he's I don't regard him as, except for the fact that he happened to be born the son of a king. I don't think he's a particularly talented, or well, maybe he has some charisma, I guess, that he's been able to convince people to do things. So he's got that, but I think he's more or less a con man, and not a serious player here. It's except that he happens to be the son of a king, and the king of a very powerful country. So that's life does that sometimes. Again, we see that in history. People who are incompetent and rather mean spirited become leaders oftentimes in history, and that can have major consequences too. So yeah, we have a situation here where an incompetent guy is now, without Bledla's restraint on him, he's just kind of going down this horrible journey
Or
of
even Yoramon's for that matter, because
yeah. I mean,
Yoramon took over.
Yormon is doing his own thing, and
That's true.
he kind of takes over from. For me, it was always going to be in the end an exploration of Yormon.
Though
Um,
he's kind of irritated by Erkenwald shenanigans.
yeah, sure, yeah, but he's often doing his own thing.
One of the things I like
Uh,
is that like everyone in Torland land, like everyone hates each other out there.
yeah, yeah.
Like
I mean, there's a lot
Erkenwald,
of
well, Erkenwald, I don't think Erkenwald likes anyone, but like Yoramon hates Erkenwald.
love.
There's
Yeah,
some people who follow Bledla who hate Yoramon. Like they're like Erkenwald don't like Yoramon very much, or
right.
well, I think he's actually okay with him. He's not as irritated with him as Bledla, but
But yeah, no,
nobody likes
that
each other
fractiousness,
out here.
yeah, and that fractiousness has a consequence in this book, because Torland, seemingly mighty Torland, actually falls apart in the face of
Torland, I don't know why I
the
call it Torland.
Ilarkai threat. So yeah, I mean, even the strongest of kingdoms is vulnerable when it becomes fractious and divided. So
Indeed, yeah, they even I think they even bring that up at the beginning or somewhere in the book where they're like, well, I think it's when it's when the Wildlands people come and invade. Actually, is when
exactly.
they bring up like, that really screwed it up. And there's even soldiers who are still fighting because Erkenwald and his band of maniacs are still around.
Yeah.
Um, Even they're like, man, this isn't worth it. Yeah, but I'm getting
Mm.
ahead of myself. And there is a mysterious silver-haired man running around.
Yeah.
Who should I just say it?
Oh, I mean, we're doing full spoilers, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, but
Yeah.
but we're pretty early in, so I just wanted to make sure if I should draw it out or not. But it's
Oh,
Day Raven.
yeah. Hey, Raven. Yeah, I mean, I assume anyone who's watching at this point has read the book. So, yeah.
um, which I guess I probably shouldn't ask because I kind of think I know who it is already. But the man at the end of Prophet who wakes up and is like, oh, what a bump, and like, is that Day Raven?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's kind of odd because he almost because he was he managed to hold it off last book, but then for reasons that are unexplained, or maybe they are explained, I didn't get it the first time around. The elf kind of supplants him, but at the same time, he's still in there holding it off.
Yeah.
And he kind of becomes like a Jesus figure. Or I kept saying that to you, and you were like, kind of, but, you'll see.
Yeah. I mean, he's clearly mortal. He's not the divine incarnate or anything like that.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, he reminded me of Jesus based on the kind of,
Sure.
he's
message.
kind of this homeless guy walking around preaching to people. Or, well, I guess he's not homeless, but he kind of is. It's weird.
He is really, though,
Yeah.
isn't he? Yeah. Yeah. No, what happens there, if you want a little clarity on that, in my mind at least, at the end of the Prophet of Edan, Dayraven has given everything in this struggle to defeat Bledla. And as a consequence of allowing the elf's power to emerge from him to that degree, he's lost control over it at times. And this struggle has essentially resulted in him having a loss of memory. Now, this is a question about identity. If you were to lose all your memories, Britain, would you be the same person? That Britain who wakes up and is like, whoa, who am I? What's going on here? Would you still have some vestiges of your personality? In other words, would your personality completely change just because all your memories are gone? And that again leads to questions of, well, who are you? Are you your memories, right? Or is there more to you than just your memories? Is there an essence of Britain there that would still be part of you, even if I took away all your memories magically? And I think that's what I'm looking at with the Dayraven, or the Prophet, as he's known, because he doesn't know he's Dayraven anymore. But I still feel like there's an essence of him somewhere in there, and that essence is what's struggling. That essentially good person is what's struggling against the elf, who simply sees humanity as a pestilence, as a cancer on this in this world that would be better gotten rid of because it would reduce all the suffering in the world. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does. I hear you. I mean, I don't know how I would answer that question. I don't.
I don't know the answer either, but yeah, I would never take away all your memories.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate that. Don't take my memories. It kind of reminded me, because again, I read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell earlier this year, but there's that scene when he's in Venice and he's experimenting with other magic, because at this point he has nothing left to lose, and he removes his sanity because he realizes that insane people, for lack of a better word, are more susceptible to seeing magic, or if that makes sense. And he basically just removes his sanity, memories, whatever you want to call it. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit, except it's a little different. Yeah. Because well, it's not quite as sad, at least initially. But I kind of like that he becomes like a different personality. Like you don't call him Dayraven till a little later in the book. He's the Prophet.
Right.
You're not really Dayraven anymore. He's the Prophet.
Yep. I mean, we do change as a result of our experiences, and he's been through a lot. He's lived a lot of lives at that point through the elf's power. And that, of course, would have a tremendous impact on you if you were to go through something like that. It would change you in ways. And so he's very kind of like, having lived so many lives in that way, he's kind of like an old man almost.
I mean, I don't know if you were pulling from that consciously when you were writing it, but that's just kind of what I'm like, oh, Strange removing his sanity.
It's been so many years since I read.
Except it's not voluntary.
Yeah, no, I wasn't thinking of. I love that book, by the way, but it's been a lot of years since I read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So
fair enough.
I don't think I was consciously pulling from it at any point.
No, I imagine not, but it reminded me of that when
Sure. Yeah.
you know, um, I don't know if you kind of thought of the magic in the way that Susanna Clark did in her book, but it's kind of
Mm.
funny. The magic in it reminds me of Strange and Norrell a little bit,
Hey,
just in
if
terms of like the magic comes from. I mean, I don't know if fairy exists in your world, but the
uh,
elf is kind of like fairy a little bit, except
yeah,
he's
they're
not a
they're
weird English gentleman.
yeah. No, I think they may come from the same ultimate realm, or
It's possible.
but yeah. Again, I love that book, but and I think we're, to some degree in a very different setting. Obviously, we're drawing from some similar source material. Let's say,
Yeah, fairy has a long history in fantasy,
does
so
long and respectable. Yeah.
yeah. I'm reading Gene Wolfe's The Wizard Knight right now,
Oh, cool. I want to read that. I haven't
and
read.
that's kind of his riff on the high fantasy.
Cool.
Um, so it's existed for a long time. The kind of
Oh yeah.
where does magic come from? You know. Anyway,
Yeah.
bit of a tangent. I'm very good at those. But yeah,
Yeah.
a lot's going on in the world of Edan. It's chaos, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Very much
The
so.
the Wildlands people, or the Northmen, as I like to call them, are they're kind of miffed that Torlin
Abandoned them.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
They're like, what the heck? They just bailed on us. Let's go
Yeah.
invade them. Yeah, that's just like, all right.
I mean,
Um,
from their perspective, their honor code, that's worse than being a foe. Being an ally who bails like that is that's the lowest of the low, and you deserve to be wiped out.
so it's kind of like guest right. You can't break that no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's funny. Um, what else is going on? Up, Erickenwald is still around, and he's
Hmm.
you know
He's kind of spiraling into a decadent pit of selfishness and debauchery. Yeah.
pretty much, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was like, I wonder where he's at, and then he shows up. And I texted you. I'm like, aha! Erickenwald has made his grand return.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's really grand. He's kind of, it's kind of interesting with Erickenwald. I'm like, like you never really go into this. That's fair. You don't need to, but like, what happened with him? Because like
Mm,
everyone likes his dad. Everyone
yeah.
was like, "Oh, his father was a good king, and this guy's an idiot." Like, was his dad like secretly like beating him behind the scenes or something? Or did he spoil him? Was it the other way around? It just kind of
Yeah.
went
Yeah. I
went wrong.
don't.
Did you even think about that? Or
I haven't gotten into that, but the fact is, I think oftentimes if you have a parent, particularly if you're a son with a father who's uh, revered,
mm-hmm.
who has accomplished much. As the son, you may feel inadequate. I think deep inside Erkenwald is a feeling of inadequacy, of insecurity, and a lot of what he does is a result of him trying to compensate for that. Deep down, he doesn't feel like he could ever really be as good a king as his father, but he's going to outdo him, right? He's going to where his father simply at one point uh, conquered Cargillion in order to have a treaty to allow missionaries from the way to proselytize there. That's as far as he went. Erkin was, well, I'm going to conquer that, and I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to conquer everybody else, because I'm going to prove that I'm a better man than my father. Does that make sense? I think that's one
Fair
of the things
enough.
that's driving him. Of course, he does get his, I suppose, comeuppance, if you want to put it that way, in this book too, where he is forced to I mean, forced empathy, is that a thing? I don't know.
I was
He
about to
has
say,
all
oh
these
yeah,
memories
I have some
shoved into his
thoughts
brain
about
from
Eric and Wald
dreaming.
as we're going on, so
Okay,
I
cool.
imagine it'll be fun. Um, we also get some new players in the game, if you
Yeah.
will. I'm forgetting her name at the moment because I just woke up about
This one?
30 minutes ago. Yes, that one. I was about to
Saren.
say.
That's Saren.
I was about to say. I'm guessing she's the young scrappy girl on the.
Yeah.
Hopefully not getting burned alive. Is she just by a fire there?
That's the scene where she and Galdor and Abin and Gnorn and Orvindil are sitting by the fire, and Abin is plucking his harp, and he seems to realize that she's very interested, and she reveals that she actually does sing, and then it ends up with her singing while Abin plays, and that for me was a really important scene because you really get to, I hope, get a sense of this beautiful young person dealing with the tragedy and the trauma and the suffering that she's been through and turning it into something somehow beautiful in that moment. And of course, the other people present around that fire feel that, they feel it. And I hope that comes through in that scene. But yeah, that's that scene.
Oh, okay. I was about to say I don't think she's being burned alive, but
No,
I
no,
hope
she looks
not.
remarkably calm if that's the case. Yeah.
It looks kind of like that a little bit. I mean, I love the cover, but it kind of looks like that a little bit on the cover, unless she's like really
Yeah.
looking in the fire.
Well,
Anyway,
it's a stylized representation, stained glass window. So yeah, she's simply looking into the fire. But yeah, I hear you. You could mistake that for someone being burned at the stake or something, I guess.
I mean, this is about a religious war, so I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, you can forgive me for making a mistake. Though
I forgive you.
I should note I didn't think it was that way, but I was it kind of looks like that a little bit with the
Yeah,
anyway. But Saren makes an appearance, and it's quite interesting that she kind of forms a friendship with the prophet, also Dead
yes,
Raven,
yeah.
considering who she may be related to. But again, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself.
Oh, that's fine. We're doing all the spoilers anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I try to keep some order to this,
Okay,
but I tend to jump around because I like to keep these as casual as possible when I do conversations like this.
works for me.
Um, but yeah, lots going on. Basically, you have like this like, good lord, how long is this? Like almost 700 pages.
Oh
So,
yeah, something like that in the
oh,
paperback.
657 is my copy.
Okay.
So
Hopefully
it's
mine's the same.
it should be. I think it's the same copy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I just love how my cat bursts in. Anyway, um, but yeah, lots going on. Yoramon has taken over, and he's doing his thing. He's basically a mad scientist at this point. Is that a good way to describe him?
I think it's very good. Yeah.
He kind of at this point he kind of I don't know if you've read Watchmen, but he kind of reminds me of Ozymandias a little bit. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
if he's going to commit genocide anytime soon. Well, unless it fits his interests, but I don't think he's gonna hatch a
Not
crazy
that, but
scheme.
I see what you mean. No, his intention is the opposite, really. He wants to defeat death.
Hmm.
So, yeah. But he
I suppose
certainly,
that was a bad reference then.
I mean, not entirely. I think he does regard himself as the smartest person in the room at any given moment. But his willingness to sacrifice anything in order to achieve that goal makes him dangerous, and his arrogance. But there are aspects of him that I deeply sympathize with. Like, all right, so death is something that we have to wrestle with in life, and it's painful when we lose loved ones, and even contemplating our own mortality is. I
I
think one of the what things that makes us human really is
that
that
is
so I feel at the same time that I do feel that Yoramon is arrogant and does some terrible things. There's a part of me that sympathizes with him in a sense.
yeah, he becomes kind of a supervillain in this book, and I'm like, Yoramon, you were my guy. You were the normal one these last couple. I was
I mean, I don't
mistaken.
know if he was ever normal,
That
but yeah.
yeah. He seemed more sane in comparison to like Bledla, but I guess
Well,
that's
that's a
not
pretty
saying
low
much.
bar.
I was about to say that that's probably not saying much, but that's funny you bring up death because I feel there's a conversation later in the book where I don't remember it exactly. Kitty, stop meowing. Where I think it's Dayraven and the elf are talking. Dayraven's talking with somebody, and he's basically like, and he's talking about how human beings always talk about, or human beings are, we try to figure out how to cope with death. There's only one certainty in life, and that's death.
Yeah.
And we all figure out how we're going to deal with it. And I think he's talking with the elf about this, and I kind of felt like, I think this is kind of the mission statement of this series, really, in a nutshell.
Sure.
Is kind of your exploration of like how people cope with that.
Yeah.
Come here.
Yeah, if you look at some of the influences, in the series, you have the Old Norse and Old English, do great deeds so your name will live on. That is one way of facing mortality. Courage in the face of certain doom and all that. And if you look at the answer that it arises out of the East from religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, realizing your fleetingness along with understanding your connection with everything else, that you're not just this isolated entity, that your consciousness is part of something vast, that is, you're part of all of life, you're part of this vast, infinite, in fact, tapestry. That's a response to mortality. Bledla's response to mortality is, I am going to make sure I'm right in terms of my idea of the afterlife by conquering the world and forcing everyone to agree with me. That's a response we've seen in the world many times. And it's a fear-based
and
response.
I mean, even from non-religious people, just people who are overly idealistic and
Sure.
will shed blood to create their perfect world.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Um,
So yeah, all of these are different responses to our mortality. You're right.
but I felt like that, or well, I thought, I'm like, it's kind of Philip outlining his mission statement, though I don't know if that's what you were thinking about when you wrote it at the time, but that was kind of, I'm like, that's how I would probably sum up the series pretty well. It's
Yeah,
like, how
I
do
guess
people?
it's the question I'm exploring more than a mission. I think,
Well,
at least
okay,
in my
yeah,
own.
I probably should have, said that, but
Oh, that's okay.
they're synonymous.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of, I'm like, this is kind of what the series is about, really, and so it was kind of interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah. 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 I agree. I think that most literature is about really two things: death and love, which you could say are death and life, and two sides of a coin in a sense. So yeah.
I never thought I'd bring him up I bring him up a lot, so I won't pretend to be coy, but it kind of reminds me of something. I'm kind of paraphrasing him here, but Cormac McCarthy said life and death are the only things worth writing about.
Yeah.
Though there are plenty of other people who've said plenty of different things about what's worth writing about.
That's true. Yeah.
That's his view, though. I don't know how well read of fantasy he was in. Probably wasn't a big reader of it though. But
I don't think he was, but who knows? Yeah.
um, but yeah, going back to Return of Edan, there's a lot going on. The world is kind of in a weird spot right now. The war's
Yeah.
over. Day Raven's disappeared. Well, I forgot to bring this up. Day Raven and the Funky Bunch. The Funky Bunch go after Day Raven because
Yeah.
he's lost his memory. Like, we got to get him back in the fold.
Before he destroys everything.
Yeah. And, I kind of jumping ahead a little bit. It's kind of impressive that Day Raven was able to hold it off for that long. And I
Yeah.
mentioned this to you because, like, even Yoramon, as powerful and clever and as intelligent as he is,
Yeah.
couldn't hold on for a second.
Not very well, more than a second, but not much longer.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I was about to, it didn't feel that long. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, because the elf was just like, ooh, your knowledge, I'm just gonna take it.
Well, there was a trigger there. I mean, it was probably inevitable, but when the high priests Morcar and Edulf showed up, and I see them as, they're most obviously corrupt. They're
They're
they're they're
basically
not
thugs working for the
they're not
church.
good people, right? Yormon's response to their arrival there was rage, and the rage is not really a good emotion to be having when you're trying to control something as vast and powerful as an elf in this context. So I think they also reminded him of what he is, or what he was. He's trying to be a better person. He is genuinely trying to be a better person and trying to be this sacrificial vessel the way Dayraven was, because Dayraven can't take anymore. He's done. He's about ready to completely lose to the elf. And so Yormon is taking over in that moment. And he has genuinely altruistic motives at that point. He has had a breakthrough with Dayraven. Does that mean that he's a totally new person and that he
Probably
doesn't
not.
have selfish motives and all the other parts of him that were him before that moment? Yeah, they're still there, and he's
Basically
reminded
went,
of
your
them.
head explodes.
And so, yeah, I mean, his angry response to them reminding him of who he was is to blow up their heads, and then that's when the elf is like, yeah, oh, okay, I'm taking over here, boom, and then really Yormon is gone at that point. There's no more Yormon there. It's really the elf.
I'm like, I kind of, I always, because like, if I feel it kind of is interesting comparing him and contrasting him with Bledla, but I think his fatal flaw, kind of like Bledla, is that there's a single-mindedness to what he's doing. It's very
Sure.
different aims,
Yeah,
but
I
he is
totally agree.
very
Yeah.
singular in his purpose, and you're not deterring him no matter what to his detriment, and that's ultimately what leads him to his fate.
I
Though,
find that the most ardent religious person is actually in many ways similar to the most ardent atheist. That they have probably more in common than they would like to realize.
oh yeah, no, I don't want to get into that conversation, but I agree with you though.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So yeah, I mean, he and Bledla do have a common, I suppose, arrogance, yes, and that's one way to put it. And the question you brought up about Dayraven, why is he able to hold on so long with the elf?
yeah,
It
I was
may
gonna.
not be a matter of power so much as a matter of intention, a matter of one's innate goodness, let's say, and how one views oneself in relation to the elf.
And like Yormon kind of realizes, like, man, I'm pretty powerful. I mean, I'm not Bledla, but I'm pretty, pretty
Yeah.
powerful. But this elf magic makes what I do look like child's play. He's
Yep.
dealing with something completely different than.
Yep. And at this point, Yormon really is very powerful. He's augmented his power by stealing some from poor old Bagsack.
Oh
So
yeah, I almost forgot about Bagsag.
yeah.
I was telling you, I'm like, I have kind of a soft spot for those egotistical moron kind of characters who are just kind of like, have you ever seen Blackadder? With
Oh yeah, I love Blackadder. Yeah.
Rowan Atkinson. He's kind of a character like that. The British really specialize in that trope in a lot of comedy shows where they're just like, they're super stubborn. They don't ever admit that they're wrong. They just kind of, and they're often played for laughs. And I don't know if Bagsack is meant to. I laughed at him a couple times because I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god, he is playing you, dude. I don't know if I'm that smart in terms of reading people, but even I can tell that Yormon's
Yeah.
playing you, dude. Like,
Yeah.
but I kind of
Yeah.
felt
Poor
sorry for
Bagsack.
I felt sorry
Yeah.
for Bagsack though, a little bit.
I hope so. I felt terrible for what I put him through.
I mean, especially as we realize because I've dealt with this in my life. I'm like, he's kind of that guy who's just been not really, just never really caught a break. And
Yeah,
don't me wrong, some of it is his fault, but like
yeah,
but even when he's not doing anything, things just go wrong for him.
yeah, yeah. I agree. He's been bullied. He's not obviously popular. He's uh, struggled with feeling inadequate and feeling like a failure, and that gets reinforced by the fact that he is isolated and alienated, and I feel terrible for him. That's why I felt actually a sense of how do I put it? Happiness for him that he was able to play a role in this story later on, after he's been stripped of his power, and he is found by Galdor and is cleaned up, so to speak, and he's the one that points out, well, because he escaped from the same dungeon that Dayraven is in, underneath the castle, underneath Sigsild. He's able to give Saren the idea of going into that dungeon through that little narrow, constricted space in order to get to the prophet, in order to get to Dayraven. And God bless her, she does it, in an act of incredible heroism, in my opinion. That may be the most courageous thing anyone does in the entire trilogy, is her going through that little tiny little outlet leading from the river into the dungeons. So yeah, but that wouldn't have happened if Bagsack hadn't been discovered and given that vital piece of information. So he has a role to play. We all have a role to play, even someone like Bagsack.
Um, yes, indeed. It's interesting the role he plays in the end. He kind of becomes part of the group, really.
Yeah, yeah, he
Which is
does.
funny because he was one of the people in the first book
Yeah,
who was like, "Oh, this guy's a witch," for
yeah.
lack of a better word. Um,
Bagsack's redemption arc, I
yeah,
guess.
I
Yeah,
guess so. Yeah. We'll get the redemption arcs in a minute because I was gonna talk to you about Erkenwald, but
yeah.
um, that reminds me. God, I'm so sorry. Names are blanking on me today. It's
That's all right. I'll
Sequara,
probably
right?
overlook. Sequara. Yeah,
Sequara, yes.
yeah,
She is also in play. Um,
very much so.
uh, she would love nothing more than to go after Dayraven from the accounts of it, but she's like, duty, I gotta do my thing. And but which is kind of one of my, I have to admit, one of my kind of pushbacks a little bit. I kind of liked her characterization in the first book as kind of like a Jedi-like character. She's kind of
Uh-huh.
struggling with the whole, I care about people, but I can't get attached, whatever the hell that means. Um,
Right.
though I mean, I know George Lucas was also. I think that's like a concept in Buddhism. I know George Lucas was influenced by Buddhism as well. So,
Sure. Yeah, an Eastern thought. Yeah, definitely. Yep.
um,
Through Joseph Campbell, especially,
I
actually.
was a little disappointed that you kind of dropped that a little bit. You're just kind of like, oh, she and Dayraven are a thing. And I mean, I thought you did it pretty well, them getting together. I would have liked some more like inner conflict, like duty. I like Dayraven.
Mhm.
Duty. I would have liked that personally. But
Yeah.
yeah, she's just like, you know what? I like Dayraven. I'm gonna go back home though. You know what? Let me push back on myself. I guess she is kind of prioritizing her duty over finding
Mhm.
Dayraven. So
That's the idea.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe I was a little too hasty there.
Well, yeah, I think she's been trained for so long to put herself second. And
I guess I thought there would be a little more angst.
well, I think there's plenty of angst in terms of, first of all, she's, as I was saying, she's been trained to put herself second and to put her duty first, and her duty is to Astrolad. She's grown up with that whole mindset that I am essentially a sacrificial leader, that I'm a servant to my realm, and she feels an incredible obligation. The fact that she went off to help Dayraven fulfill his purpose to fight Torland way off in Sildaran, And now she needs to get back home because she realizes that home has been devastated and she needs to do whatever it takes to protect her home. That's her duty. And she is very much torn about that. And she could never have done it if it weren't for the fact that Galdor and the others are going after Dayraven. She's essentially put her trust in Galdor that he's going to take care of Dayraven. Her intention, obviously, once she is able to take care of Astrolad, to free Astrolad from the Torlinders, the first thing she does is she goes back. Essentially, one reason is to help the Adenese, to help Queen Rona and the others to recover Adenon from the Torlinders. But really, she's making a straight arrow for Dayraven. She wants to get to him now that she's done her duty by Astrolad. So I feel like both things are present with her always. And yeah, I mean, I hopefully get that across to people that she has this conflict, very much so still, between her personal desire and her duty to her realm. So
Yes,
yeah.
I like her arc in book 2 kind of coming full circle a bit with her being, she is technically a healer, and but she
Yeah,
is
that's the other
also,
conflict. Yeah,
but
she's
she's
a weapon.
also going to war.
Yeah. Yep, that's another huge source of conflict within her. She wants to be a healer. That's how she sees herself. But her duty, again, requires her to be something she doesn't want to be, which is a weapon in this case.
Yeah, she's basically like, is this who I am now? Is this what I am? Like,
Yep. Yep.
I heal people. This is not what I should be doing. You
Right.
know.
And once you do those things, can you go back? Can you
Yeah.
be that simple healer ever again? Probably not. You know.
Also, she's gonna have a kid. her
Yeah.
and Dayraven are gonna have a kid.
Yep. Well, she is anyway.
Well, okay, yeah, that's No, it's. I mean, I'm guessing Dayraven is the father because.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the father.
As far as I'm aware, that's the only person she's banged, for lack of a better word. I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't wish to be so coarse, but that's like
Yeah. That's as far as I know. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Imhar and the Queen are together, which Imhar's never lacked for audacity, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, good for him. I also feel that he's had to mature. Both he and Sequara had to make this decision where they're in a position where their loyalty to their kingdom conflicts with helping Dayraven. And Imhar also chose to be with Adenon and found himself eventually in the arms of Queen Rona, who's older than he is and is, in a sense, way out of his league. But at the same time, I think that they do offer a lot to each other, a lot of comfort. And I think Imhar matures a lot in this story. A lot of it happens behind the scenes, but he's looking after Runan, who is Rona's son, the second son. The oldest died earlier in Prophet. And it's similar to his relationship with Dayraven. I mean, he's used to taking care of a younger person because he's looked after Dayraven all these years. So his skill as a elder brother type figure, it comes into play. But he also matures a lot, and he was a bit of a whatever you want to call it, but a ladies' man or whatever.
I was about to say ladies' man, but yeah, no.
When he was earlier, but this whole experience of being at war, fighting for Adenon, and being a support to Queen Rona has, I think, matured him a lot.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, hey, look at you, Imhar. You really, you're getting places, you're doing things.
He is a Duke now as well, Duke Silverhand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, what was I gonna say? He has a silver hand, though he has a bit silver hand since book 2. So they call him Duke Silverhand now.
That happened in book 2. Yes.
It's interesting seeing him in a kind of fatherly role, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And this was kind of interesting. I don't know if you watched Samwise's video, Sam's video about Way of Edan. But
I did actually. He's a really brilliant analyst, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
he brought up something I didn't really consider about Dayraven and Imhar's relationship, which, I mean, I guess, I mean, maybe we talked about this in Way of Edan, but technically he was his slave. I'm like, I didn't really
Correct.
think of it like that. I kind of thought of it more like a Frodo Sam thing. I mean, you do
Yeah.
bring up in the Way of Edan that, yeah, Imhar was a slave at one point, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I thought they were more friends slash companions than like, I am your master over you, you know?
Yeah. Well, the truth is, slavery has existed in many forms throughout human history.
I would call it like indentured servitude, which again, I
You
guess is
could
a
call
form
it
of slavery.
thraldom. Yeah, thraldom, indentured servitude. But slavery has existed in many different ways in many different societies. The slavery that we Americans think of when we think of our own history in the 19th century was incredibly rigid and institutionalized and racialized. So it's one of the worst examples of slavery in the history of humanity, in fact. You can find examples of slavery where the humanity of the people who were slaves was never taken away the way we took away the humanity of slaves in the United States. They were still seen as people, but they were people who had fallen into debt, or they were people who were conquered, members of a tribe that were conquered.
Yeah, like the
Uh,
Romans would do that.
right. But their humanity wasn't taken away. In fact, in many cases, for example, in many early Germanic societies, you could buy your way out of slavery eventually. If you were a good, hardworking slave, you got some wages, and eventually you worked your way to the point where you could buy your freedom and go have your own farm and do your own thing. That's not a permanent state. In other words, not something that you're born into, that you're identified with because of who you are. It's just happened that you had bad luck, or you lived in a way that was not very frugal, or you were unlucky enough to be the member of a tribe that was conquered. But it's not that you're not human anymore. So I'm not saying any kind of slavery is good, but
I get it. Not all slavery is equal.
yeah, yeah. I guess that's
I
one way to
hate to
put it.
say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, but
Um,
there have been various, and in different societies, and slavery is a bad thing, period. But there are worse forms and less worse forms, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, but I hadn't really considered that because I kind of thought, I mean, Lord of the Rings is pretty easy touchdown, but I kind of thought of him having kind of like a Frodo
Yeah.
Sam like thing going,
I
like
don't think that's far off. Yeah.
Imhar helps out and Dayraven is like, they're more like friends than like,
Oh, I think that once Imhar's freed by Dayraven's father, um, he's totally in at least in the type of slavery that exists in the mark. Once you're free, there's no mark left, and there's no brand that says you're this for life. He's a free person, and it is a genuine. I think in the case of Dayraven and Imhar, it's more of they're brothers more even than friends. That's how they think of each other, I think. So,
yeah, I mean, I think even Imhar calls him little brother even throughout the
oh yeah,
series.
yeah.
Um, which it's really sad. I guess I should just go into it now. Um, I deduced it. Probably not the didn't take Sherlock levels of deduction here, but Saren is his family, isn't she?
Saren is Imhar's niece. Yeah.
Which
Um,
I
the
remember when I saw
daughter of the
Erkenwald,
sister that they were
because
supposed to find. Yeah.
there are a couple things like she brings up like her mom was from a different land once upon a time and then she dies. I'm like,
Yep.
oh, you jerk, Philip. That's gonna really suck when Imhar. But Dayraven kept his promise ultimately without even realizing it.
He kind of sort of did, didn't he? Yeah.
Um, um. So I just thought that was, and also her and Dayraven becoming friends. I'm like, oh, that's foreshadowing, isn't it? I've read enough of these stories.
Yeah. 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 I know you know that when you see it, but yeah, no, that was important to me, and I'm so glad that early that's going way back to the first book, early in The Way of Edan. The idea of seeking Imhar's sister is something that Daeraven wanted to do in order to do right by his brother, by his friend.
But
And
sadly, Erkenwald, that little gremlin, decided to
yeah,
just ruin everyone's fun, as he always likes to do.
yeah,
He's a jerk.
narcissists will do that, won't they?
They'll ruin your fun.
Yeah,
AKA living in a small farm somewhere. Just kind of doing your
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Um, though it's really sad, you know. It's like, dang it, man, that you were so close. You were so close, Day Raven. You didn't get there in time. I guess I should talk about the prof. I mean, we were kind of talking about him a little bit, but I kind of like that he gets new powers, I guess, from the elf. Necessarily that he basically gives people complete self-knowledge, like he does to that one guy at the very beginning of the story,
Uh-huh.
where he's like, "You're gonna be a jerk no more. The the second coming is at hand," and he's like, "Oh,
That's a foreshadowing of
I
what
have
he does.
changed."
That's a foreshadowing of what he does to Erkenwald. Yeah.
And then Eric and Wald's like, "Oh, the prophet's here. I'm gonna go murder him now." And then
Yeah.
he shows up and like, I
Doesn't
think
go
like
so well.
his eyes are like they're shining. I think how you describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's full out like
And
elf mode. Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
reminds again going back to kind of Christian thought because that's what I'm familiar with.
Hmm.
Kind of like Paul on Damascus a bit, where
Sure. Yeah.
he's like no, and he's like it's kind of funny. It also, well, that
I
and
mean, Paul back when he was Saul, I guess,
yeah,
right?
yeah, Paul when he was Saul. It's weird. I don't get it, but I don't know why they change names in the Bible. But
Well, I
anyway,
think because in that case, he's a new person
yeah,
afterwards.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you've ever seen The Crow at all, but
With Brandon Lee,
yeah,
Bruce Lee's son. Yeah.
which
Yeah. A
this
long
is
time
a
ago.
I was about to say this is a really large leap, but it kind of reminds me when at the end of that movie when he grabs Top Dollar and basically does the whole 30 hours of pain all for you, and that's basically what he does to Erkenwald. He's basically
Yeah.
like, here are all these lives you've destroyed and defiled and ruined. You're just gonna feel it now.
Yeah.
And
What did you think of that?
I was like, yeah, that's a fitting punishment for
Mm,
Erkenwald. And then
yeah.
I was like, you know, and then when the invasion happens a little later on, and Erkenwald's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna try and talk these people down and actually, you know, do the right thing for once. I'm like, oh my god, Philip, please do not tell me you're gonna try and redeem this son of a bitch.
Oh no, that goes really well,
Please,
right? Yeah.
please don't do that because, like, as far as I'm aware, he's crossed the line. He's not coming back. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
look, I want to believe in the best of people, but there's just some things you do you just can't go back from. You know, I'm like, please don't tell me you're gonna try to redeem him. Oh my gosh, and he fails miserably, and I think just gets murdered by a mob. And I'm like, you
Yeah.
know what? I'll take it.
Yeah.
I hate to laugh, but like it's
I
just
mean,
like
there is some cosmic irony in his demise, I think. So, yeah.
he's like,
Trampled by
white
the
people, I am your king. I have come to save the day. And they're like, get out of the way, idiot. We're trying to save our lives here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like, you know, that doesn't matter anymore once, you know, invaders come in. Um, you know, it's just like, but I'm like, I'm glad you didn't redeem him is all I'm saying. I hate to
Okay.
say that because like, I have a belief that most people do have redeemable parts of themselves. But
Uh-huh.
there are certain people who do things that are so evil and beyond the veil that
Yeah.
like, you know, I don't know if you can go back. And Eric
I don't know.
Wald's
It's a
kind
good
of crossed
question.
it.
It's a really good question, Britton. Is there a point where you've gone beyond a certain line and you're irredeemable? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know there are some great authors who've explored that. Um, one that comes to mind is Flannery O'Connor, for example, in the short story "Good Man Is Hard to Find." There's a character there called the Misfit, who's a serial killer.
Oh,
But there's an indication in the story that, and people can interpret it their own way, but I think there's an indication in that story that there is something within that very messed up, horrible, uh, evil person, that there is a hint that there's something in there that is capable of redemption. So yeah.
sure.
But yeah, it's a tough question. It really is. That's something that I explored a lot in one of my favorite series. It's Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yes, I'm going to.
There are a lot of characters who are pretty awful that kind of are redeemed, and then there are some that seem to be like, no, this is just too much for me, and I don't want to see this character redeemed. Yeah.
Well, since you brought it up, I am hoping to at least read Gardens of the Moon next year. So I'm sure
cool.
you'll be very excited to hear that.
I'm happy to hear it.
No, but going back, I'm glad you. I mean, well, I don't know. I still think that Erkenwald is still kind of thinking selfishly, like, oh, I'll be thought of as this hero. Even though he's kind of he's basically just overwhelmed with, like, I don't know what you would call it, empathy.
I don't know if it's empathy, but
other people's feelings. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. His attempt to save Torland at that moment
still kind of selfish, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. Dayraven fails to redeem Erkenwald. That's for sure. And his forced empathy doesn't really work. And it's.
I mean, I don't want to just write it off as he's being Erkenwald again, because, like, on some level he's like trying.
Changed.
Like, he's trying in some level to do the right
There's
thing.
Been some improvement. Yeah.
You know. Yeah. But at the same time, he's still thinking, like, oh, I'll be remembered, Yeah. So maybe you're right about the inadequacy thing that, you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Though I suppose it's not in the realm of, again, above the realm of possibility. I mean, there are kings who have been considered great kings who have created people who become not good kings.
All the time.
One of my favorite examples is Edward Longshanks, Edward the First.
Sure. Edward the First, and Edward the Second was not a great king. And then the third again was a great king. So you never know.
Yeah, it's weird how that works. Hereditary government, a hereditary monarchy is it has some serious drawbacks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But to sum it up, I'm glad you didn't try to. Well, I guess he was trying to, like, make things right as much as he could, but he fails miserably.
Another example, maybe Henry V, very successful at least in combat, and then Henry VI had serious mental issues. So yeah.
Yeah, but from all accounts, Henry VI was an all right guy, just not fit to be a king.
Right, not saying he was evil like Erkenwald, but he had serious problems.
Though the prophet is kind of but going to the prophet, he's kind of walking around and like, again, I compare him to Jesus because that's, again, what I'm familiar with, or the Buddha. Because I know you're pulling.
I think both are good
Buddhist
comparisons. Dayraven, of course, is mortal, but the message of forgiveness, the message of peace, the message of reconciliation. I think you're right. There are some reverberations there of Christ's message, at least the way I read it. So yeah, I mean, I feel like those are the parts of Christ's message that often get overlooked. They turn the other cheek and love thy neighbor and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I kind of mentioned this because I wrote a review of Prophet of Edan. I remember you read it, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, not to go on a non sequitur, I'll bring it back to the story here, But
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting because I've noticed a lot of people seem to think of like Christianity as like a conformity. They tend to equate Christianity with conformity. But like
Right.
when you go back to the Bible and you read what Jesus is actually talking about, he's actually talking about the exact opposite. He's saying, "No, you're
Right.
being too complacent. You have to remember what your purpose is on earth, which is
I mean, Jesus was a nonconformist.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
Um
And got in trouble with the religious authorities of his time. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
I'm sure other people like the Buddha or similar. Though the Buddha was a prince, yeah. before
well, he
he
gave it up though. He gave
before
it all
he
up.
I was about to say before he was like there has
Yeah.
to be something more to life than this. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
put all my wealth
Yeah.
away. I'm gonna walk around with the common people and see what happens.
But it is a truth, I think, that and you see this sometimes. Like I've watched documentaries about people who have had a loved one murdered, for
Oh dear.
example, and these people have somehow found it within them to not only forgive the murderer, but to even form a relationship with that person, which somehow elevates not only themselves but the murderer. Like there's a genuine reconciliation and a genuine, I think, on the part of the murderer and these situations, seeing the humanity of this person that they've hurt so deeply. It shatters them and it helps them to find their better selves. I don't know how those people do that. That amazes me when I see that. But
Indeed, I don't know if I
forgiveness is
could.
something that it can be really powerful,
Yeah, I was gonna just
and
say
that is the
that.
message. David is asking the Kargilis and the Adanese, whose homes have been invaded, their loved ones murdered, they've been
Defiled.
treated brutally, but he's asking them to forgive the Torlenders, and the what he brings about there in is miraculous. I think it is beautiful.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
is
I
something
think.
I feel the world needs. So yeah, and if there are similarities to what Jesus was preaching, then I think that's perfectly valid. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just I mean, I don't know if I don't know if Dayraven was bucking trends like Jesus was, but he's definitely well, I guess he is actually cuz he's basically telling people um I've read some Nietzsche, and I remember Nietzsche describing Christianity as I mean, he didn't think very fondly of Christianity, but he did say that Christianity basically makes people reject their inner nature, as he would put it. Like Christianity
Well,
tries to get you to reject your inner nature in some way.
maybe Christianity as it evolved by Nietzsche's time as an institution, which bears little resemblance to what I think Jesus was preaching, actually.
Well, sure, yeah, no, I mean, I should note I don't agree with Nietzsche's opinions about a lot of things,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
but it's kind of funny, but it's also I think really a testament to Dayraven's character because like there is that part of him that's still in there, and you
Yeah.
can still see him making a difference in people's touching people, like the
Yeah.
deserters of the Tauran deserters who are like, screw this,
Yeah.
I don't want to do this anymore. Like,
Like Edge, the guy who rescues Saren and brings Dayraven to her to heal her. Edge is he's a Torlander soldier, and I wanted to show through him that these Torlanders, they're not just evil. They're not monolithic, evil, bad people. There are good people here, and these soldiers realize that they've, in the process of obeying the authorities that from their own kingdom, have done some terrible things. So yeah, it's a tough thing to ask someone to forgive when someone else has done something horrible to them. But I do feel that ultimately that is the way to peace for the person who has been wronged. That is somehow um, a healthier path for them than holding on to that pain and that hurt and hating the person who did it. If they're able to somehow come to an understanding of that person,
Yeah, yeah. I
who
mean,
did
I
that
think if I
horrible
could, I mean, I think if I could sum up what this book is about in like a sentence,
thing. Uh-huh.
there's a line. I'm heavily paraphrasing here, but he's basically like, yeah, that's all well and good, but what next? What's gonna
Yeah,
happen next?
right.
And what happens next is kind of what the whole book is about, really.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and Dayraven ends up meeting Yoramon. Well, they've already met, I guess, because there was that
Right.
big climactic battle last book. Hey, over here.
Yeah, Yormon is the one that brought Dayraven to Bloodlaw in the first book. So in the Way of Edan, he's in the swamp. I don't know if you remember that far back, but when
Oh yeah,
Dayraven
that's right.
with the Aglac and all of that, when they're collecting Aglacs.
Oh yes,
So
that's right.
Yormon, yeah, yeah, they've met. They know each other. Well, Dayraven doesn't remember it, but
And the Yoramon's basically, he's experimenting with magic. Some people try to
right,
kill him earlier on in the book, and he's like, and he's just,
Kolberg, the priestess. Yeah.
yeah, who's basically like female bloodlust. Was she in love with him? Probably.
I mean, she wouldn't have thought of it in those terms, but you and I might think, oh yeah, she had a kind of a, which she had sublimated or whatever you want to call it. Her desire for Bloodlaw had been, she would have thought of it in purely holy terms. Let's put it that way.
Devotion, we'll say.
Yes, she would not have thought of it in sexual terms.
Oh no,
Yeah.
no. But Yormon's like, no, I'm gonna take you down, and basically he has the ability now to remove one's magic from
Right.
from
Right.
from from a
Someone else
person.
with the gift. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I
Yep.
mean all right. I guess that I mean that's not a new thing in fantasy, but all right, that's and that's one of those cases where I'm like, Yaramon, you were playing with some real dangerous stuff,
Yep.
and that's
Yeah,
why I
he
think
is.
his fate is not only inevitable but rather predictable when you think about. Not in a bad way. I'm just it's set up throughout the
Appropriate.
books. Appropriate,
Yeah.
yes, is a better word.
Yeah.
Because it's like he blindly rushes into things without really considering the consequences.
Yeah.
And the elf is like, ooh, I'm gonna take that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess we kind of talked about this earlier, but would you say that Dayraven is the most powerful magic user in the world of Edan? Because like again, he kind of because like even Yoramon couldn't hold off the elf for that long.
Right.
Though I know you
Yeah. Again,
said
though,
though I know you
I don't
said
think it
that
was
it's
a matter of power.
though I
Yeah.
know you said it doesn't really matter with power. It's more just about who he is as a person.
His intentions, his relationship with the elf. For some reason, the elf didn't feel it was necessary to take over Dayraven. Um, and
Yeah, the elf almost
that's a.
admires Dayraven in a weird
I
way.
think so. I think so. That the elf is curious about this particular human. And has learned from this human.
Yeah, he's like he's
So yeah, it's interesting that is a question that I actually am kind of fascinated by. Why was Dayraven able to hold on for so long when he should have died the moment he encountered the elf? But
well, him and Yoramon meet again,
yep,
and Dayraven ain't playing, or well, the prophet ain't playing. He's like, I know what you're doing. Like, you're not gonna
yep,
fool me.
yep,
You can fool your little hussies on the side and female bloodlow. You can't fool me because I know your thoughts. And he's all like, "Oh, this is awkward."
yeah.
So they're in that kind of awkward situation where they're meeting,
Yeah.
and they
At the
form
same
a
time,
very
though, I think
interesting relationship.
yeah,
Oddly enough, because I didn't think Yoramon was even capable of this, but he actually inspires the better nature of Yoramon in a weird way.
oh, very much so. This is something about Dayraven that you see even as early as the Way of Edan. For example, when Orvandil first meets Dayraven, there is something about this kid that makes Orvandil want to live up to the best vision of himself.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that in Dayraven reflects your best possible you back at you and says, you should try to be this. You know, that's the kind of influence that he just seems to have on people,
Mm-hmm.
even before he met the elf. Maybe the elf magnified that in him, but I feel like he's a person that people would meet and walk away from that meeting saying, "That's a really nice guy, and he makes me want to be a better person."
Mm-hmm.
So there's just an innate goodness in him that
But
it
yes,
is
even
magnified by the elf, but it also it, he makes Raven scary at moments too. I think the elf does. So yeah,
I mean, even Yoramon. I mean, I'm not saying that Yoramon isn't capable of good, because like his intentions are good. He'll go to some pretty ruthless extremes to achieve that, but you
you
know,
agreed.
I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
if I don't know if I would call him like, I don't know if he's like Bledla, where he's just murdering people. So he's like, convert to my
No,
religion
yeah,
or I'll
he would
murder
avoid
you.
murder. He would avoid murder if he could. If he believed that someone wasn't really in his way, he wouldn't go out of his way to hurt someone. But he most certainly does um, go too far. Obviously,
Hmm.
yeah,
Like he even reflects later before he takes the power. He basically is like, all these years I've been scheming and doing all this like, backroom deals, and just now I've met the most powerful being in this world, and it all just
yeah,
feels meaningless. Again, kind of reminds me of that Bible verse. Uh, in the end, it's all meaningless, fleeting in the wind.
yep, I agree. So
Um, but yeah, it's interesting how like he even influences Yoramon to be a better version of himself, if you will.
yeah, yep. Yeah, he does indeed, and there is that within Yoruban, and I think within all of us.
Well, sure, yeah.
We have the ability to change our narrative and to try to live up to an ideal image of ourselves. Let's say we're not. That's not to say that you automatically become this ideal version of you, but you can work at it, right? And on the other hand, if you see yourself as an essentially inadequate and or even terrible person, then you become more that you. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he uses some other people to help him out with his schemes.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up exploding their heads because I guess they walked in on him at a bad time.
Yeah, yeah. Very
Uh,
awkward timing on their part. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't think they were gonna make it out alive anyway. So it's like,
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone was rooting for Morcar and Edulf to make it out alive. So,
no, though I was like, there's one part where he's basically doing his supervillain monologue, as I like to call them, and
uh-huh.
geez, that's really a nihilistic way of looking at things for a priest.
Sure.
um, because like I think one of the things he says, the only thing that's certain is death, or something. Again, I'm paraphrasing
Mhm,
here.
mhm.
Um,
So let me ask you, Britton, what did you think of the ending? Where
yeah,
I
I
mean,
was
the
about to say.
ending, the real ending. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say I hope to get to the climax before too long, because like there's I don't want to get too caught up with a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
Um, I thought it was a really good ending, actually. I
Okay.
was, for a minute there, I'm like, okay, so Raven's back, and they're gonna ride off and have a kid, and you had that hope spot, Philip, again, you jerk.
Sorry.
I was like, dang it, I knew Raven was too good for this world, because I'm like, okay, it's gonna end
Mm,
two ways. Either Raven's gonna, either die or go off into the like, again going back to Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell, go off into the realm and go on more adventures,
yeah.
or we're just gonna get a fantasy happily ever after. But from what I've read, Philip, I don't know if you're that interested in that. So I was kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, so either he's gonna die or he's gonna like go off into the ether and discover more about magic, or something like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it was,
and I guess he does
you know,
both.
kind of does both, really, there, doesn't he? I mean, he does return to Edan there at the end, and
Haha,
he has
title
given the
drop.
world. Yep. Go back to that title. I mean, he has given the world a new vision. He has taken an institutionalized religion and given it a new twist, because he has said, essentially, like you compared him to Jesus earlier, and I think that's something that where I see the comparison actually is where Jesus sort of redefined for many people what they thought their religion was teaching them. And that is certainly what happens with the way of Edan, which is a religion that had evolved to the point
Hmm.
where you have someone like Bledla leading it and insisting that they have to forcibly conquer other kingdoms in order to bring about their vision. Dayraven says, no, that is not what Edan is all about. Edan is about loving your not only your neighbor but your foe. Edan is the life force that dwells in all people, the energy that animates you and animates me, and in fact, you are me and I am you, and that is what Edan is. So you can imagine that after this trilogy is over, that he's been in much of this place. He's been in most of the kingdoms and spread this message. So he is redefining this religion in a sense at the end of things.
Yeah,
He's had
it even
he's
gets
had an
kind of
impact that will continue to reverberate. In other words,
yeah, it even gets kind of existential towards the end because like the elf basically
sure.
drops the whole and he basically goes, nothing matters. It's just like you dumb humans just made up a bunch of crap. And Dave
Uh-huh.
Raven's like, no, no, no. Which I hate
Dayraven
to
insists.
which
Dayraven is one who insists that humanity is redeemable.
I
That
hate to argue with the message of the book here, but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, okay, I don't know if it's just the elf is an unreliable narrator, which is always possible, but the magic
Mhm.
exists. There has to be something else, that we don't even know about. I hate to argue with
Sure.
your book, Philip, but like,
Ah,
but it's like I'm like, I don't know. But
well,
that was
Dayraven
interesting.
comes to the
That was interesting to
conclusion
think
that
about that kind of conflict of
Day,
of ideology.
Dayraven comes to the conclusion that something else that you're mentioning is Edan. That's the name for it, you know. But yeah, Dayraven unfortunately finds himself full circle back in the mark at the end of it, and uh, in order to save not just his friends but the place where he came from and give them a future or give them a shot at life, makes the sacrifice there
And
at
you
the
gave
end,
and you
which
gave us the hope spot, Philip. You gave us the spot
yeah,
where
yeah,
where him and Sequara get back together, and I'm like, oh, they're gonna raise their kid together, and
yeah,
and they didn't. You just
no.
yeah
But he did give his child a chance at life, and a lot of
yeah.
other people as well. Yeah. So, were you surprised by the Raven and understanding what the Raven actually was the whole time? The Raven that goes way back to the first book, which lured Dayraven into the
Oh
forest.
yeah. No, that's that. I'm hoping that was a Norse reference because ravens are a
Oh,
big
sure.
thing in Norse.
Yeah.
But I was like, I was like, oh man, this is. I'm like, oh man, he's really. That was crazy.
Yeah. That was in the realm of origins. There is no such thing as time. Time is an eternal. Just an eternal presence. So Dayraven in Return to Edan was able to send that message back to Dayraven, back in the way of Edan and in the Prophet of Edan through himself, the Raven. He is the Raven. He was the Raven the whole time. Yeah.
So to like fulfill his destiny and all that, as they would say in Star Wars.
Something like that. Something like that.
No,
To do what he has to do right now in this moment. Yeah.
a couple people die. Galdor sadly dies, though.
Galdor, I miss him. Yep. Yeah.
Um, though I kind of imagine that was how he was gonna go out. I don't know if he had really much to go for at that point because his old friend
He,
slash love interest
he
passed away.
That's right. He had lost Arna already and was ready to go, I think, in some ways. Yeah.
I
Elfwe
thought,
dies. That's tragic. Earl Elfwe. Yeah.
oh yeah. There's even a scene of Eric and Wald that I forgot to mention it earlier, where his like guard, I think, maybe it was like someone, it's like his uncle, maybe. No, his
Uh-huh.
uncle takes over. Never mind. But it was somebody, and he's basically like, I can't even believe you. You know what? I serve you because you're my king, but I'm just gonna say this: you're a disappointment to me and
Uh-huh.
to
Yeah.
all the other people, which is like the worst thing to say to anybody.
Yeah. That's Nothelm. I think you're talking about Earl
Nothelm, yeah.
Nothelm. Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
like, your father was a great man, and I followed your dad because I believed in him, and I followed
Yeah.
you because I loved your dad. But you are a disappointment. And I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, that's like the worst thing you can say to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. For
No.
sure. Yeah.
But
But we
cutting.
do lose Elfwe. Also, Captain Ludicon from the Mercenary
Oh,
Company.
yeah. He sadly passes away.
Yeah.
Um,
Trying to
and,
figure out if Jay Raven really is the prophet or not.
and,
Yeah.
uh, and, oh, God, the Wildlands character, his girlfriend dies as well.
Munzil.
Munzil,
Yeah.
thank you. I knew it had an
Yes.
M.
He goes out like a true, you barbarian warrior there at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah, no, that was another one where I was like, yeah, I didn't think he was gonna survive the whole series.
Uh-huh.
He was already someone who didn't have much to lose anyway.
I'm afraid so. Yeah, with
Um,
all the Illucar being taken over by the elf that way, the army of elf duolas. Yeah.
but the ending though, it was mostly satisfying though. It was very
Okay.
I don't know if it's like I don't want to compare it too much to Lord of the Rings, but I mean it does have that
Uh-huh.
kind of all right, we're back, you know. Well, more the movies than the books, because in the books, like the scouring of the Shire happens, and
Right. Right.
Frodo's basically a shell of himself by the end.
Yeah. Well, I
Uh,
suppose that whole going back to the mark is kind of my scouring of the Shire moment in a
oh yeah,
way.
for
But yeah.
sure. He even meets his old girlfriend, and he's like, "Oh wow, like
Ebba, yeah, I love that scene. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
almost forgot about her." I hate to say
Yeah.
that.
Well, she
Um,
hasn't been around in the story much, but she's been there, just doing her own thing, having a
and
kid. Yeah,
Dayraven's like, "Look, I know we had bad blood, but I'm asking you as a one person to another. These creepy elf people are showing up, so you got to get going." And they're
yeah.
like, "Whatever, idiot, get out of here."
Well, this is our home. We're not gonna
I
we're not
know.
gonna budge.
I know it's
Yeah,
I know it's
people do that.
I know I'd probably do the same
You'll find
thing.
people, in the path of a hurricane who are told you have to leave, you have to, and they're like, nope, this is my home. I'm not going anywhere.
Um
So
which, luckily they stop them before they get to the mark.
yeah.
I think
Otherwise, it could have been bad. Yeah,
I think I texted you. I'm like, God, some people are too dumb to live, or
yeah.
something like
Well,
that.
I don't know. There's more to it than there's an emotional component there. I think that's tough to override for many
But
people.
I'm
So
horror. Day Raven fulfills his promise. He
yes,
um
so it's not all bitter. There's some sweet at the end.
and
Yeah.
Sequara is gonna have a little girl, maybe, probably.
Yep. Yep.
And there is hope actually. Where
I hope
life
so.
is
I
anyway.
hope that people finish this book definitely with, I would expect, some melancholy and so forth, but also with a sense of hope and beauty and promise.
Mm-hmm.
So
But yeah, I liked the ending. It was mostly a satisfying thing, and it makes me wonder what will. And it's like coming to an end of a great journey, as you always do when you finish a fantasy series like the Edan trilogy or Lord of the Rings or what's another or Game of Thrones. Whenever Martin gets around to finishing that, I
Oh, I
imagine
don't know if we'll get that ending. I'm sorry. I'm
it's
sorry. We're gonna have to be happy with that being an incomplete journey, I think. But, yeah.
or first law is just anyway. But yeah, it was mostly
Yeah, I don't think First Law specializes in warm, fuzzy feelings at the
no.
end
Well, well, I mean,
either.
I wasn't necessarily talking about the warm, fuzzy feeling, but just kind of melancholy feeling that it's ending.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
at an
yeah.
end.
I hear you.
This is the end of a long journey that you've been on. Um,
Yes, indeed. Yes, and hopefully I gave you some satisfaction there.
but yeah, I mean, that's about. I mean, there are other things I could talk about, but I want to keep you here forever. But if you don't mind, I know you probably don't have to. You probably. I don't know how much time we have left here, but if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a little bit about some future Edan stuff and also some recent
Sure.
stuff that's been happening.
Okay.
If you
Yeah, I have probably like 5 more minutes. Why not?
okay, cool. Because I try to be respectful of people's time here, but I thought I'd ask you a little bit about stuff that's been going on. Um,
Sure.
for starters, the audiobook came out. Finally, the ever
Yes.
mythical
Yes.
people were having a drinking game at this point. Like who's gonna finish first, Rothfuss, Martin, or Alan with the audiobook of Way of Edan? Um,
That's so funny.
well, not literally, but I was kind of spreading that around, and nobody thinks I'm funny,
Okay.
so just
Well, I thought that was really funny, and I'm sure Alan would maybe give you a grudging chuckle at that one.
um,
But he did it. He
he
beat
did it,
Martin
yeah, he
and
did it.
Rothfuss. Yes. Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised. I'm like, he didn't do all three because, like, my God, that took a long time.
Well, I'm pretty certain he'll put out the second and third much faster
But
now
then,
because there
I
was a
thought about it for a minute.
huge.
I'm like, if he did all three, it would have taken much longer. So, like, it was a
Yeah,
real
yeah. Well,
conundrum.
there was just a huge learning curve for him, in learning, and there's a lot to it. I think people probably don't realize how much work goes into narrating an audiobook.
Oh, sure.
And
And
there's a
hey,
reason
Alan.
why they're really expensive
And sure, Alan.
to.
And hey, Alan. No hard feelings. I get it. You got to do it. Don't declare a
Yeah.
holy war on me.
Oh no, I think he'll be fine. But
um,
no, he put a ton of work. He was very professional about it, and it really shows. I think I have not. I mean, I'm sure that somebody along the lines won't like it, but I have only heard tremendous praise so far about his narration. He just nailed it. I mean, he absolutely is a masterful performance. He
I
did a beautiful job on it.
I will admit I have a little I have a bit of a hard time with audiobooks. Not I'm not against them. I
Uh huh.
just John from Talking Story says he has this thing called John Brain where he's like, "Oh, I'm listening. Oh, look, butterfly." That's me.
Oh, I'm the same way. Yeah, I'm the same.
Though I'm considering experimenting more with audiobooks. I won't make promises about listening to the Edan. Though I'm not. I would like to try it at least because I like Alan's channel. Um, but another question is another thing I'd like to bring up real quick, Broken Binding. I guess
Yeah.
do you have
Yeah.
like connections over there, or were they just like, hey, Philip, we're gonna do some
Well,
stuff with your books?
the owner and founder of the Broken Binding, Matt, read The Way of Edan and enjoyed it. So yeah, the collaboration really resulted from that, and I could not be happier. It's a dream come true to have my books. Hopefully, all three, because if the first one sells well, I'm pretty sure they'll do books 2 and
I
3.
mean, you're even getting some banger illustrations and like a forward.
Yeah,
Like that's a dream. Getting a forward from somebody.
from Mark Lawrence. Yeah,
I mean, I haven't
yeah.
read Mark
Mark Lawrence
Lawrence.
is one of my favorite writers of all time, and to have that is just wow. I doesn't get better really, and I'm thrilled, and I believe it is. It's going to be a gorgeous book. I love the cover. I think it really conveys that the spirit of the mark of Kinsford. That relationship between Dayraven and Imhar is right there on that cover.
I
And
didn't think of Dayraven as a blonde, but okay, I'll take it. I was kind of
uh-huh,
I don't
yeah.
I'll admit I didn't really have a picture of what he looked like. So sorry about that,
I
but
think probably dirty blonde. Yeah, that's how I always
um
pictured him. Yeah.
but yeah. So Dan's been cooking recently, as the kids like to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully, look, I'm just happy when the story resonates with people, and to be able to have it out there in various formats and various versions, editions, is just I can't really even describe how wonderful that is to me, and hopefully people love it. I mean, some people do love audiobooks. I'm like you, actually. I'm not much of an audiobook listener. Actually, the first audiobook that I ever got through was Alan's narration of The Way of Edan. Um,
uh,
so yeah, there's a confession. But he did such a marvelous job that even I know the story pretty well, and I have never been able to get through an audiobook. Even as someone as great as like Andy Serkis doing Fellowship of the Ring, I just kept feeling like I'm not the right person for this. But yeah,
I'm like, ooh, YouTube video. That's me. I just get
there are
distracted.
people though who love audiobooks and consume their stories that way, and I think that's fantastic. And I'm thrilled to be able to offer them this format. So yeah, and then the special edition is just like wow. I'm so happy with the art and everything else. And Patrick Leo did such a great job with the art direction, and getting all the artists on board and everything else. So yeah, couldn't be more happy.
And my last question, I promise, is
Okay.
what is the future of Edan? Also, is that a title? Potential title?
No, but
No, I'm kidding.
the next book is I'm actually working on now is a sequel that takes place about 15 years after the trilogy ends, and
I have heard I have
based
heard
on
mummerings of this from you and other
yep,
people.
yep. It's called Wild Darkness Gathers, and I have a complete draft. I am in the process of editing, and I hope to put it out in 2025. So yeah.
It was a bit of a non sequitur, but it was kind of funny the other day. I picked up a Ian Esselmont book at my. This was actually yesterday. I picked up a Ian Esselmont book, and who did I find but your nemesis, A.P. Canavan,
Oh
being
yes.
thanked in the at the beginning of the book.
Not only is he thanked by Esselmont, but there's one book where that Esselmont dedicates to AP.
Oh my
So
gosh, that's sacrilege, Professor
yeah,
Fantasy,
to
Doctor
the
Fantasy.
nemesis. Yeah, no, he is a brilliant developmental editor
He edited your
slash
books,
advanced
didn't he?
reader. He is my developmental
You
editor.
you even thanked him in this. I think I don't.
Oh,
You,
he's in all three
oh,
acknowledgments. Yeah, he's in all three. Yeah.
um,
So
but yeah, I am sad, Philip, but I am also happy that this happened because I'll admit November is was kind of a month where I was going to catch up on a lot of things. Have some discussions with some people and
good,
um
good.
and because how because October is when I talk about Halloween. Um, but I'm glad we managed to get this together, and I'm glad we
I
managed
am
to do all
too.
three.
Yeah, well, thank you for reading the trilogy, and
This
it's
was
always
great.
a
Conversations, anyway.
oh, good, good. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the discussions too. But
Um,
thank you, and I'll be seeing you on YouTube. I'm gonna
yes.
have you over on my channel in a little bit too, so
Oh
that should be
yes,
fun.
is that the first announcement? Because I've been kind of trying to keep quiet a little bit about it. I didn't know when you were going
Yeah,
to
it's the
bring it
first
up.
time I've mentioned it, so yeah, dear Doctor Fantasy, look out, everybody. We're gonna
Ooh.
get Britain's life story.
Um.
So, you ready for that?
Oh man, yeah. But as I like to do at the end of these things, Philip, if you have social media, feel free to share.
Oh yeah, sure. You can find me here on YouTube, Philip Chase, the best of fantasy, and on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, I am Philip Chase 9090, and that's it. I'm not anywhere else. I'm pretty bad at social media, to be honest. So yeah.
Oh, did you bring up your website?
Oh yeah, philipchaseauthor.com is the name of the
Oh, okay,
website.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, all right. I think that's it. You know, I little or Actually, I'll tell you this after we're done recording. But anyway, Philip, thank you, sir. I appreciate you being so giving with your time. I'm sure a bunch of people have told you this, but I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it as well. Thank you, Philip. You're always just. I mean, you're so kind to give your time.
Well, I enjoy this community, and I love talking about great stories, and I'm just happy to be able to talk with people also about my particular story that I've put out in the world. So thank you.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, I am sure I will have Philip on. Actually, I have plans to have Philip on again. But those are plans for next year, so we'll worry about that when next year comes along. But Philip, seriously though, thank you.
Thank you, Britton, and take care of yourself.
And until next time, ladies and gentlemen.